Minecraft is a game notorious for not just its bugs and glitches, but also its exploits. An exploit is when people abuse loopholes in features to do something the devs didn't mean to happen. A lot of the time, these oversights need to be fixed because they tend to break something important about the game, like letting you dupe items. But sometimes exploits aren't quite so clear-cut and fall into a bit of a grey area. They may not directly cause imbalance, and occasionally they may even solve design issues or create entirely new gameplay. This is often called emergent gameplay. It's when parts of the game designed to do one thing collide with one another and make something new happen. Something that wasn't initially intended to happen, but is considered a net positive. Minecraft has all sorts of examples of this, but one of the most well-known and widely used is the Iron Golem farm, a special farm that generates iron ingots free of charge. This farm is much loved by a lot of the community, and it's time we get rid of it. So subscribe if you like what you see, please don't tie me to the stake just yet. I'm Simply Sark, and let's remove the iron farm. Now, I know you might be thinking I'm crazy here, because iron's great and the farms are extremely useful. And you know what? I completely agree. But I also think these farms are the totally wrong way to go about it, and should be patched out for something better. The problem is, that is so much easier said than done, because removing the Iron Golem farm comes with lots of strings attached. The Iron Golem farm has existed pretty much since the introduction of the mob itself. People were really quick to notice that because these guys dropped ingots and could be generated by reverse engineering their spawning behaviour, you could create a completely autonomous farm that gave you a fair bit of iron. Through lots of different iterations, each new generation of the farm improved the speed, capacity and output until we had these absolutely crazy contraptions. Dozens of villages crammed over one another meant the golems could be spawned in at hyperspeed and created such an overabundance of iron that you may as well have just thrown the excess away. The absolute irony of this was the fact the golem spawning mechanic, until only recently, existed purely to fuel this exploitative behaviour. Iron golems were designed to fight off zombies. They were added alongside the siege mechanic to give defenceless villagers a fighting chance to not be wiped out on the first night, before you could help them. The joke of it all, however, was that this mechanic never functioned properly. Golems required a particular head and door count to start spawning in, but the game was almost incapable of naturally generating enough residents and houses to meet the requirement. It was nearly impossible to even encounter a naturally spawned golem. This meant the feature was defunct, and the only purpose it served was to uphold this strange emergent gameplay the community had created for itself. This begs the question, why have these been in the game so long, and why haven't the developers just addressed the problem already? The answer is, they've tried, and failed. If there's one thing that's quite clear, it's that the devs don't like this exploit either, and would love nothing more than to finally get rid of it. We've seen a few attempts over the years, from outright nerfing the spawn rate to introducing the oddly suspect iron nuggets, waiting there innocently, minding its own business, totally not waiting until no one's looking, to strike. There are two main reasons golem farms have proven difficult to remove. One is a somewhat frustrating emotional answer, the other is an actual legitimate answer that needs addressing. So the first is that while the community can be wholesome, there's also a fairly toxic side that makes change difficult at times. It's the reason Notch called it quits all those years ago, and why there's a lot of backpedaling from the devs when they push controversial features. 1.9's combat update was the biggest example of this, when there was vicious backlash from players unhappy the status quo they were comfortable with was being changed. The devs succumbed to the pressure, reined in the scope of the changes, and delivered a fairly nondescript overhaul of combat. Something similar has happened with Iron Golem farms. The community have gotten so used to the farm being part of the game that taking it away feels cruel and somewhat unnecessary. And it falls into this weird zone, because if you did remove golem farms right now, it actually would take something away from the game. And that's because Iron Golem farms do legitimately fill in a missing part of the tech tree, a piece that doesn't exist by design that players genuinely do have a need for. Minecraft doesn't have good enough options to gather resources late game, and that's why people are so attached to something like an Iron Golem farm. It provides what the base game doesn't. The simple fact is that mining for resources is a bit dull, and while it's acceptable early game, as your needs increase, so does your demand for materials. Iron, over the years and years of updates, has actually become part of an ever-expanding list of recipes, but the game's supply hasn't kept up with the demand. You didn't need a double chest of iron in 2010. With newer items like anvils and hoppers needing to be made in their hundreds, we do now. But mining hasn't changed. Iron ore generates in exactly the same pattern, density and distribution as it always has. And though mining efficiency has been souped up with enchants and status effects, it doesn't change the fact people don't want to have to manually dig those resources up forever. They want to feel progression through the tech tree and alleviate the burden so they can focus on those bigger and bigger build projects. We've all heard that subtle sigh YouTubers make when they announce they need to go mine for a couple hours in order to continue work. My biggest gripe with iron farms, and perhaps this is somewhat pedantic, is that this is a game about mining, and at its core, gathering resources should be based around mining. Weird spin-off mechanics that have little to do with the real part of the game should not supplant and undermine that key design principle. I'm not against people being able to gather lavish, hedonistic amounts of iron if they want, but the pursuit should work around gathering it from the underground, in block form. This game is about excavating, not popping magical metal men out of thin air and murdering them. So, how do we go about doing all this? Some people might say there actually is already a mining-based pathway to gathering resources fast and autonomously. Slimestone quarries. Don't get me wrong, I think some of these machines are extremely impressive and are a commendable accomplishment from their creators. But I've never liked the idea of relying too heavily on the community to unlock key tech tree milestones. These complex machines can only be designed by a select group of the smartest members of the community. The average Joe shouldn't be left to the mercy of others bestowing these contraptions upon them. The game should be designed to allow them to achieve those results on their own merit, and if someone wants to go to extremes, that's when these high-level inventions have their place. Another argument I think people might make is that by removing iron golem farms, you're stifling players' creativity. Exploit or not, people put a lot of effort and brains into designing these farms, and removing them robs them of that opportunity to express themselves. While this is true, I'm not suggesting this exploit be removed with nothing to take its place. I think all that player ingenuity should be funneled back into more relevant parts of the game, because people still want to be occupied with challenges. So then, what do I think is the solution here? If we want to remove iron golem farms, we need to address the earlier problem. You can't just pull the rug out from people's feet, you have to give them an equal or better alternative. The first step is we need to increase iron ore density. Or to be more specific, we need to change how it generates in the first place. There shouldn't just be more of it in general, but what I think is that there should be more opportunities for knowledgeable or high-level players to gain access to better deposits. A decent example that already exists in the game today is how gold ore generates in higher quantities in mesobiomes. If you know this piece of trivia and track down the biome, you're rewarded with more gold than you'd usually be able to get. I think iron ore, and perhaps even just ores in general, could work similarly, but I also think it would make sense to gate it behind progression milestones, so the player doesn't have access straight off the bat. One way that could work really nicely is if dispersed throughout the world were mega veins of ore. These could be tracked down like mansions and buried treasures, where you could find or buy maps that allude to where these souped up deposits are hiding. Maybe additionally, the specific area they spawned in generates higher amounts of ores too. This way, only higher level players can uncover where the best places to set up a new mine are. There's also the tedium aspect of mining that I think needs to be relieved. The blast furnace was a good addition for this. It means you get your ingots twice as fast, but there's still more to be done. We're pretty much at the end of the line with enchantments and tools with how much faster we can make them without it being silly. So I think we need to come at this from a new angle and extend the tech tree with something new. TNT. TNT is actually really great at clearing an area, and I think it fits into the game much better than stuff like multi-block breaking. The problem is it's too violent, unpredictable, and too risky. You might accidentally blow your stuff up. I think it would be nice to see new variations of TNT added, specialised for mining. One idea is a boring subtype. This would work sort of like a log or piston in that it's rotatable. When it explodes directionally, only breaking blocks in front. Also, because the blast is condensed, it goes further than regular TNT, creating a tunnel. This would allow players to carve out organised branch mines and uncover ores much faster than with a pickaxe. But I'm not going to pretend a big part of why people like iron golem farms is that they're automatic and generate iron for free. That's why I think automatic mining capabilities also need to be improved. But what's the best way of doing that? Again, let's just revisit something that's already in the game: minecarts. Minecarts are pretty user-friendly, so they're a good candidate for automatic mining. However, they've got a few key design flaws that need tweaking until they'd be able to work as intended. The biggest problem is activator rails. They make no sense, and they're the reason stuff like TNT carts are a bit pointless. Instead of minecarts activating on a location basis, i.e. hitting a trigger that's been set up beforehand, they need to activate on a rail basis. Rails basically need to work more like redstone. You need to be able to actually send a signal down the rail from a central location, and that activates minecarts along the line. If this key flaw isn't fixed, then my next points are meaningless. For automatic mining to be possible, we need a few extra things. First, dispenser carts need to exist. These would be able to spit TNT to do the mining, and also be able to place rails to extend the line. The rail needs to be able to flip between a forward state and a back state. This would make any cart along the line either push on or return back down the line. I was also trying to think of an elegant way to issue instructions to the dispenser carts. How do you tell it whether to spit TNT in slot 2 or place a rail in slot 7? I thought using redstone's signal strength would be a decent solution. Doesn't really seem like anything uses it much since they went through all the effort of adding it. The strength of the signal the rail receives determines which slots are activated. This would create an entire new activity for the community to sink their teeth into. I can imagine it would be pretty fun and take a lot of clever thought to design a whole signalling system to control your fleet of minecarts. But that's just my take on it. The actual implementation doesn't really matter too much, so long as it strengthens the mining experience and funnels players' attention back where it belongs: the underground. I think we've relied too long on things like iron golem farms. The game has gotten distracted with where it wants to be and has forgotten its roots. Let's return there. This is obviously quite a controversial subject, so I'd love to hear your own thoughts on the debate. Where do you stand? Would you too like the golem farms nerfed or removed? Or do you completely disagree with me and think it's a terrible idea? You can join in the discussion over on Twitter @SimplySark to let me know what you think. But that is pretty much all I have to say on the matter for now. I do thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I've been Simply Sark, and I will catch you in the next one.